The wine glass shattered against my grandmother's immaculate tablecloth, crimson liquid blooming like blood across pristine white linen. A strange metallic taste filled my mouth as the words hung in the air. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as 8 years of struggle suddenly made terrible sense. "Good thing your parents paid off those student loans, huh?" Grandma had said it so casually, crystal glass catching the Christmas lights as she raised a toast. But I'd never finished college. I dropped out sophomore year because I couldn't afford tuition. My father's fork clattered against fine china. My mother's face drained of color so quickly I thought she might faint. The silence around the table pressed against my ears like I was underwater, everything distorted and wrong. "What loans?" I managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. My uncle smirked from across the table, face flushed with expensive wine and cruel amusement. "Wasn't that your responsibility?" he asked, words dripping with condescension. But Grandma's expression had transformed from festive to thunderous. She turned sharp eyes toward my mother, voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I sent you $50,000 every year since Paige turned 18. My name is Paige. I'm 26 and a retail worker with 3 jobs. This is the story of how I reclaimed my stolen future from the people who were supposed to protect it." Mom's whisper cracked across the room. "Mom, please don't." But Grandma stood, regal and resolute, her dinner napkin dropping forgotten to the floor. "I want everyone to hear this," she announced, eyes boring into my parents. "They used that money to fund Vanessa's honeymoon in Paris and Oliver's new BMW." Then she looked directly at me, her voice gentling just slightly. "Not a dollar went to you." I didn't cry. I just nodded, the pieces finally clicking into place. The years of struggle while my siblings lived in luxury. The nights I'd work double shifts while they posted vacation photos. The constant whispers that I just wasn't trying hard enough. I stood, legs trembling, but voice steady, and said, "Thank you for finally telling me. I was never one of them anyway." As I walked away from that table of liars and stolen futures, the winter wind outside felt warmer than the air in that house. They thought they broke me, but all they did was wake me up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the thin mattress in my studio apartment staring at the ceiling, the patterns of passing car headlights creating strange shadows that matched my churning thoughts. No tree, no gifts, just the hum of my mini fridge and the ache of betrayal pressing against my chest. $50,000 every year. For 8 years. $400,000 that could have saved me from dropping out. Money that could have prevented the 3 jobs, the skipped meals, the nights I rationed my asthma medication because I couldn't afford the refill. I thought back to the year I dropped out, how I'd told Mom I couldn't cover tuition after my financial aid fell through. She'd sighed and said, "Well, maybe college isn't for everyone." I remember the way she said it, like she was doing me a favor. I remembered coming home from a night shift at Waffle House to see Oliver revving that new BMW in the driveway, and Vanessa posting sunset photos from the Amalfi Coast with the hashtag number #newlywed bliss. I used to tell myself they earned it, that maybe I just wasn't trying hard enough, that maybe I was the failure. But now I saw the truth. They built a castle with my bones and handed the keys to someone else. The next day, I went to the public library, logged onto one of the old desktop computers, and started digging. I didn't have money. I didn't have connections. But I had something they never thought I'd find: clarity. I requested my student loan records, checked every grant, every financial transaction tied to my name, and there it was. A trust set up by Grandma when I was a baby, dispersed in annual installments starting the year I turned 18. Each marked for education, each routed through my parents, every dollar gone, reassigned, lied about. I printed everything, every receipt, every deposit, every withdrawal. Then I took a bus to Grandma's house. She opened the door in her housecoat, hair still in curlers. But when she saw the manila folder in my hand, she stepped aside wordlessly. I laid the pages out on her kitchen table, one by one. She didn't say a word, just sat there, eyes scanning, hands trembling. After a long pause, she looked up and said, "I trusted them." Then her voice broke. "They told me you were studying abroad in Switzerland." I laughed once, bitter and sharp. Closest I got to Switzerland was Googling what the Swiss flag looked like from my second job's break room. Her face turned to stone, and I knew in that moment, hell had no fury like a grandmother who realized her blood had betrayed her own blood. Grandma moved like a woman possessed. She slid the folder back toward me, got up, and walked to her bedroom without a word. I heard drawers opening, hangers clattering, a suitcase unzipping. When she came back out, she wasn't wearing curlers anymore, just a dark coat and a face that could slice through glass. "Come on," she said, "we're going to the bank." I almost laughed. "You don't have to." She cut me off. "They stole from you, lied to me, and misused a legal trust. That's fraud. Let's start there." At the bank, she didn't ask for a manager. She demanded the branch director. We sat in a glass-walled office while she laid out the papers one by one, her voice ice-cold and precise. The woman behind the desk blinked in shock. This is serious," she said. "Good," Grandma replied, "because I want it handled seriously. I want my money back, I want her future restored, and I want them held accountable." It was the first time in my life someone had stood up for me like that. They didn't file a police report that day. They filed two, one for breach of trust, one for fraudulent misrepresentation. But Grandma wasn't done. She called her estate lawyer, the same man who'd helped her set up the trust in the first place. By evening, we were sitting across from him in his office, him flipping through the documents, eyes narrowing. "They lied to a fiduciary body," he said. "This is more than theft. They rerouted designated educational funds. That's criminal misuse." Grandma just nodded. "Then let's burn it all down." It didn't feel real. 24 hours ago, I was invisible. Today, I was in a legal war room with an 80-year-old woman as my personal wrecking ball. That night, I went home to my apartment. The lights flickered as I turned the key. My coat smelled like frost and stale coffee. But for once, my heart didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a weapon. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Dark circles, chapped lips, but a fire in my eyes I hadn't seen since I was 17. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd keep scrubbing floors and smiling through broken teeth. But now they were about to learn. The daughter they buried in silence was the one walking back with thunder in her fists. By New Year's Day, everything had changed. My parents still didn't know. Not about the investigation, not about Grandma's signature on the bank's fraud statement, not about the financial records I'd uncovered, copied, and handed over to the lawyer. But they were about to. The lawyer advised us to wait until the formal notice was served, so they couldn't move assets or hide the paper trail. But Grandma, she didn't believe in silence. Not anymore. She invited them over for dinner, just like she did every January. But this time, I sat beside her, right at the head of the table. Dad walked in first, freezing when he saw me. Mom followed, wine already in hand like armor. Vanessa, freshly tanned from her winter Paris retreat, blew me a fake kiss. And Oliver gave me a smirk like he was still 13, and I was still the stupid sister who didn't matter. We all sat down. The table was full of roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and tension so thick it made the gravy congeal. Grandma raised her glass. "To family," she said flatly, then added, "and to consequences." Dad chuckled. "That's dark." Grandma didn't smile. She reached under the table and handed them a thick envelope. Mom opened it first. I watched her face go pale, then red, then utterly blank. "That's," she stammered, "that's private." "No," Grandma said. "That's my money. That was her future, and that was your crime." Vanessa leaned over to look. "What is this?" I answered calmly. "It's every dollar Grandma ever gave them for my education, which they used for your wedding, Oliver's car, their vacations." Oliver laughed nervously. "Okay, but isn't it all the same pot? We're family." That was it. That one stupid sentence. Grandma stood. "You stole from her. You lied to me. You lied to everyone. I trusted you with her future, and you chose luxury over loyalty." Mom finally snapped. "We were just trying to do the best for all our children." "Stop." Grandma's voice cracked like a whip. "You never treated her like your child. You used her pain as funding for your favorites." The room was silent. Even the walls seemed to lean in. Then I stood slowly. I looked my mother in the eye and said, "You didn't just steal money. You stole time. Years I'll never get back. While you sipped champagne, I bled for rent." Grandma placed a hand on my shoulder, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone saw me. Truly saw me. "I suggest you get a lawyer," Grandma said as she turned to leave. "And a conscience," I added. As we walked out, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They weren't family. They were strangers who spoke in gifts and lies, and soon the world would know it too. 2 weeks later, they were served. I was at work restocking a shelf of off-brand shampoo when my phone buzzed with a photo from Grandma. Mom on the front porch, face slack, arms crossed tight over her robe, while a county official handed her a manila envelope. The subject line on the document read, "Notice of Civil Investigation, Misappropriation of Trust Funds." I just stared at the screen. I thought I'd feel joy or some deep, soul-satisfying victory, but all I felt was quiet, like a storm had passed, and I was still here, standing. That night, I walked the 5 blocks home in the freezing dark, past the corner bakery I used to clean for minimum wage, and I let myself cry. Not because I was weak, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending I was okay. Back at Grandma's house, the real work began. Depositions, bank statements, phone calls from lawyers who suddenly remembered my name. Grandma's lawyer dug deeper, and what he found made my stomach turn. Over 7 years, my parents had embezzled more than $350,000 from Grandma's fund, enough to buy my sister 2 honeymoons, to send my brother to private golf school, and to throw themselves 4 luxury cruises. The entire time, I was taking the night shift at a gas station, skipping meals, drinking tap water, and rationing my asthma inhaler, all while they smiled at holiday dinners like they hadn't gutted my future. Then came the press. Somehow, the story leaked. Retired school teacher exposes family in shocking financial betrayal. My coworkers started whispering. Customers gave me weird looks. One man asked, "You're the girl from the article, right? The one whose parents—" I didn't answer. I just scanned his toothpaste and said, "Have a nice night." But that moment stayed with me. Not because of what he said, but because I didn't flinch. For once, I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't hiding. They stole from me. They lied to my face. They robbed years of my life like they were picking fruit from a tree they thought I'd never climb back into. But here I was, still breathing, still rising. And this time, the world was finally watching. The girl they left behind wasn't just surviving now. She was about to win. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday. My mom called first, not to apologize, but to beg. Her voice cracked through the line like old glass. "Can you talk to Grandma, please? She's freezing our accounts. We can't access anything." I sat there staring at my cup of instant coffee like it was the only warmth I had left in this world, and I said, with the calmness of someone long past hurt, "You used my future to fund your vacations. You don't get to ask me for favors." She went silent, then whispered, "Period." But it was never personal. That made me laugh. hollow. You stole my name, my chances, my education, and you gave them to people who never once lifted a finger. You made it very personal. She didn't call again. By Thursday, Vanessa and Oliver had both posted Instagram stories in black and white, quoting scripture about family loyalty and enduring storms. But nothing could spin what came next. A judge ordered an audit. Every gift, every transfer, every check Grandma had written was accounted for. It was undeniable. They'd taken it all. The BMW title was in my father's name, bought the same year Grandma sent $50,000 for my second semester. Receipts showed a $7,200 Parisian hotel booked just days after I emailed my parents that I dropped out. I begged them for help that week. They didn't even reply. Now the house was on the market, the BMW repossessed, Vanessa's credit cards declined, and Oliver, who once said I'd always be mediocre, was caught on camera screaming at a Starbucks barista when his app wouldn't load. Their world was cracking, and I was watching it from the safety of Grandma's living room, her hand wrapped gently around mine. She said, "You're going to be okay now." I didn't respond because okay wasn't the goal anymore. Freedom was. Not just from the debt or the lies, but from the need to ever prove my worth to people who couldn't even see it. The girl they left to drown had built herself a raft, and now she was learning to swim through fire. They weren't losing money. They were losing access to me, and that was the one currency they'd never get back. The morning of the hearing, I wore a black blazer I found at Goodwill and boots with worn soles. Vanessa showed up in pearls. Oliver wore sunglasses indoors like it was still some kind of joke. My mother's hands shook the whole time. And my father, he didn't even look at me. The courtroom smelled like cheap wood polish and nerves. Grandma sat beside me, spine straight, eyes forward. When the judge asked if anyone wanted to make a personal statement, my heart started pounding in my ears. I hadn't planned to speak, but I stood. Every step to the podium felt like walking across broken glass, but my voice didn't shake. I dropped out of college because I couldn't afford tuition. I worked 16-hour days. I ate rice and tap water. I missed doctor appointments because I couldn't pay the copay. I begged my parents for help and got silence. Meanwhile, they were using money that was meant for me to send my siblings on international vacations. I paused. They didn't just steal from me. They made me believe I wasn't worth saving, that I was a burden, that I was the reason things were hard. I turned to look at them. And I believed them. For years. My throat burned. But now I know the truth. They didn't fail to help me. They chose not to. I stepped back, each word echoing like thunder in that quiet chamber. The judge didn't speak for a long time, then finally. Restitution will be enforced. Accounts remain frozen. Assets liquidated, funds rerouted to the intended recipient. Ms. Jordan, my name, my full name. And it felt like I was hearing it for the first time in my life. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but all I remember is walking out of that building and breathing air that didn't belong to them anymore. Later that night, I took the long way home, past the campus I once dreamed of graduating from, and for the first time, I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. It looks like survival with receipts. It looks like peace without apology. And it sounds like your name being called in a courtroom. Not as a victim, but as the one who finally rose. They say silence is golden, but the silence after you've told the truth, that silence is justice. 3 months later, I walked into my new apartment. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, view of a gas station, but it was mine. Rent paid, utilities on, groceries stocked, and a check on my desk. The restitution cleared, $187,000. The court had ordered full restitution of the $400,000, but after liquidating their assets and accounting for legal fees, this was what remained. The judge had been clear. They would continue making payments until the full amount was recovered. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I sat with it for days, like it was a letter from a past version of me. The girl who cried under flickering fluorescent lights at her night shift job. The girl who watched her siblings live dreams bought with her stolen future. Now she had options. Now she had a name. Grandma came over every Sunday. She brought lemon bars and stories. And one afternoon, she handed me a manila folder. Inside were college brochures. She said, "If you ever want to try again, I'll be your co-signer this time." I didn't cry. I just nodded, because we both knew this time it would be my choice. 2 weeks later, I submitted my application to finish my degree in accounting. I would start next semester, this time with my future securely in my own hands. My parents lost the house, moved into a rental an hour outside the city. Vanessa blocked me on every platform. Oliver tried to DM me once. I didn't open it. They can keep their silence. I've outgrown their noise. Sometimes I still hear my uncle's voice in my head. "Wasn't that your responsibility?" Yes. And I handled it with more grace than they ever deserved, because I didn't just take back what was stolen. I built something they couldn't touch, not with guilt, not with gossip, not with money. Freedom doesn't come with a bow. It comes wrapped in broken glass and long nights and scars you don't show anyone. But it's mine now. And when I walk past mirrors, I don't flinch anymore. I see a woman who was left behind and still made it out. Not bitter, just done. So if anyone ever asks how it ended, tell them. She walked out of the fire holding the ashes of everything they tried to bury her under, and she never looked back. The bank statement glowed on my phone screen in the dimly lit dining room, casting a pale blue light across my face. $120,000 transferred directly into a new account in my name. My grandfather's weathered hand rested on my shoulder as gasps echoed around the birthday dinner table. "That's all the money they stole from you, Olivia," Grandpa said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, plus interest. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the polished mahogany. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot, but no one moved to clean it up. My brother Nathan's face drained of color as he gripped the edge of the table, designer watch glinting under the chandelier light. "What money?" he stammered, eyes darting between our grandfather and our parents. "The $5,000 I've been sending to Olivia every month for the past 2 years, Grandpa answered, each word precise and cutting. "The money your parents have been pocketing while watching their daughter work double shifts and struggle to pay rent." My name is Olivia. I'm 27 and a financial analyst. This is the story of how I reclaimed not just my stolen inheritance, but my place in a family that tried to erase me. I'd arrived at Nathan's birthday dinner expecting the usual. Subtle jabs about my secondhand clothes, whispered comments about my unfortunate career choices, and being seated as far from the center of attention as possible. What I hadn't expected was for my grandfather to expose the truth that had been hidden from me for years. My hands trembled slightly as I slid my phone back into my purse, careful to keep my expression neutral despite the storm raging inside me. 2 years. 2 years of eating ramen for dinner while working night shifts. 2 years of begging my parents for help with rent, only to be told I needed to learn responsibility and stop asking for handouts. 2 years of watching Nathan launch his tech startup with mysterious family investments while I cleaned office buildings at midnight just to make ends meet. And all that time, my parents had been stealing $5,000 a month that was meant for me. "Howard, please," my mother pleaded, her perfectly manicured hand reaching for Grandpa's arm. "We were going to tell you." "Tell me what, Pamela?" Grandpa interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "That you've been lying to me for years? That you told me Olivia was too proud to accept my help? That you were using my money to fund Nathan's business while your daughter could barely afford groceries?" My father cleared his throat. "It was for the family, Howard. For the family's future." "For the family?" I whispered, finding my voice at last. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. Which family, Dad? The one that includes me or just the parts you're proud of? I could feel my sister-in-law Catherine's eyes burning into me from across the table. She'd whispered, "Don't make a scene this time," when I'd first arrived. Now she sat frozen, champagne flute suspended halfway to her lips. "Livy, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," Nathan started, using the childhood nickname he knew I hated. I had no idea. "Stop," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "You had every opportunity to ask where your startup money came from. Every time I called asking to borrow money for rent, every time I showed up to family dinner looking exhausted, you never once questioned why I was struggling while you were thriving." My father stood up abruptly. "This is Nathan's birthday dinner. We can discuss family finances another time." "Sit down, Walter," Grandpa commanded, and my father obeyed instantly, decades of conditioning overriding his indignation. "There won't be another time. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with my lawyer to remove both of you from my will. Nathan, too." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. "You can't do that," my mother whispered, her voice hollow. "I can, and I will," Grandpa replied, "unless Olivia asks me not to." All eyes turned to me again, but this time with calculation rather than shock. I could almost see the wheels turning behind my parents' eyes, trying to figure out how to manipulate this situation, how to turn me back into the compliant daughter who wouldn't dare disrupt the family hierarchy. I looked around the table at the faces of people who were supposed to love me. My mother, who had held me when I cried as a child, but told me to toughen up when I called sobbing about not being able to pay my electricity bill. My father, who had taught me to ride a bike, but later decided I wasn't worth the investment he poured into my brother. Nathan, who had been my best friend growing up but stood by while I was systematically pushed to the margins of our family. "Olivia?" my mother began, her voice taking on the soothing tone she used when she wanted something. "Let's not be hasty. Family is forever, and we can work through this misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding," I repeated, cutting her off. "Is that what you call stealing $120,000 from me?" My father leaned forward. "It wasn't stealing, Olivia. We were allocating family resources where they would have the biggest impact. Nathan's business benefits all of us." "How exactly did it benefit me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "While you were allocating resources, I was choosing between paying rent and buying groceries. I was working until 3 a.m. cleaning offices. I was selling my belongings just to keep the lights on." "You've always been dramatic," Catherine muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I turned to her slowly. "Tell me, Catherine, how much of my money went into that tennis bracelet you're wearing? Or the vacation to Bali you posted about last month?" Her cheeks flushed red as she reflexively covered the bracelet with her other hand. Grandpa tapped his cane against the floor, drawing everyone's attention back to him. "I've heard enough. Olivia, would you prefer to sit at the head of the table? It seems the hierarchy around here needs some rearranging." The offer hung in the air, weighted with symbolism. For a moment, I was tempted to take my brother's place, to watch them all adjust to this new reality where I held the power. Instead, I stood up and smoothed down my plain navy dress. "No thank you, Grandpa. I don't need their seat." I looked each family member in the eye as I continued. What I needed was their support when I was drowning. What I needed was honesty when they were stealing from me. What I needed was family when I was alone. I picked up my purse and the bank statement. "I don't belong at this table anymore, and that's not my loss. It's yours." As I walked toward the door, my mother called after me, panic rising in her voice. "Olivia, please, don't do this to us." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just finally seeing you clearly." The night air hit me like a wave of clarity as I stepped onto the porch. Behind me, I could hear raised voices, my mother's tearful accusations, my father's angry denials, Nathan's attempts to salvage the situation. but they faded into background noise as I took my first deep breath as a woman no longer defined by family lies. Heavy footsteps followed me outside, and I knew without turning that it was Grandpa. He stood beside me, leaning slightly on his cane. "You handled that better than I expected," he said quietly. I glanced at him. "Better than I expected, too." He nodded, looking out at the dark trees swaying in the night breeze. "They've always underestimated you, even as a little girl." "Why didn't you ever call me?" I asked after a moment. "Ask if I was okay." Guilt flashed across his weathered face. "Because I believed them. They told me you were doing well, that you didn't need or want my help. I'm sorry for that. Truly." "How did you find out they were lying?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me. Grandpa sighed heavily. "I ran into your old college roommate Madison at a charity event last month. She mentioned how worried she was about you working multiple jobs. When I told her about the monthly payments, she was confused. That's when I started digging." I nodded slowly. The betrayal went deeper than just my parents. It had infected every relationship, creating a web of lies that had kept me isolated and struggling. "I don't need their pity anymore," I said finally. "No," he agreed. "You need justice, and you're going to get it." 2 days later, I received a call from his lawyer, Jonathan Miller, who had handled Grandpa's affairs for decades. Grandpa hadn't just cut my parents and Nathan out of his will. He had transferred everything to me: the lake house, the business shares, the trust fund, all of it. The calls started immediately. My mother left a dozen voicemails, each more desperate than the last. "Olivia, please. We didn't know it would go this far. Can we talk?" My father was more direct. "You're tearing this family apart over what? Money? After everything we've done for you?" Nathan didn't bother with fake tears or accusations. His message was simple: "You'll regret this. Enjoy being alone." But I wasn't alone. As the truth spread through our extended family, shared by Grandpa himself through a series of private calls, people began reaching out. Aunt Rebecca called to say she'd always wondered why I looked so exhausted at family gatherings. Uncle James confessed they'd been told I had spending problems and was too irresponsible to handle money. "They lied to everyone about you," he said, voice heavy with regret. "We should have seen it." A week after the dinner, I walked into a local office building wearing jeans and a simple blouse, my hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Grandpa had set up everything: an office, a business name with my name on the door, Olivia Bennett Financial Solutions. He'd been planning this for weeks since discovering the theft, working with his business contacts to secure the space and set up the legal framework overnight. He hadn't just given me money, he'd given me a future, a real one, and I was determined to build it from the ground up, with or without any acknowledgement from the family that had tried to erase me. It didn't take long for the backlash to begin. Catherine was the first to make a public move, posting one of her carefully curated Instagram stories, wine glass in hand, laughing with friends, with a caption that read, "Some people don't deserve second chances. Entitlement is ugly." She didn't mention my name, but everyone knew who she meant. A mutual cousin sent me a screenshot with a message of support, the first of many family members choosing sides. Then came Nathan's podcast interview, which he likely never expected me to hear. But one of my new clients, who knew my family history from our conversations, sent me the link with a warning. Nathan's words were cutting. "Sometimes, when you give money to the wrong people, they think they earned it. It's sad, really." I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I channeled my energy into building what Grandpa had entrusted to me. I arrived at my new office before 7 a.m. every day. It was small, just 2 rooms and a reception area, but it was mine. I met with clients, took business development courses, and learned how to handle finances the way Grandpa once had. I didn't use his last name publicly. I wanted to create something that couldn't be dismissed as a handout. Meanwhile, Grandpa wasn't staying quiet. He told everyone in his extensive network, friends, investors, business partners, exactly what had happened. The truth spread quickly, and people began distancing themselves from my family. Nathan's startup lost 3 major clients in 2 weeks, clients who Grandpa had personally introduced him to years earlier. My father was quietly removed from the board of a foundation he had chaired for over a decade, as Grandpa's oldest friend was the foundation's biggest donor. My mother stopped showing her face at the country club altogether, after several women she'd considered friends stopped accepting her lunch invitations. I learned all this through Grandpa's weekly updates during our Sunday dinners, a new tradition we had started. He never gloated, just reported the facts as he heard them through his network. Still, none of them apologized. 3 months after the birthday dinner, there was a knock at my apartment door. When I checked the peephole, I saw Nathan standing there, looking disheveled and desperate. I opened the door just enough to see him clearly. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice neutral. "And how did you find my address?" "Mom had it from when you needed her to co-sign your lease last year," he admitted. "Look, I messed up." I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I didn't know about the money," he insisted. "I didn't know they were lying to Grandpa." "Then why mock me every year for not having a real job?" I asked. "Why call me a burden? Trash?" He had no answer. I started closing the door, but he stopped it with his hand. "Livy, please, just tell him to undo the will or split it. I'm your brother." I looked him directly in the eyes. Number, "You're the man who laughed while I struggled." I pushed the door shut firmly and locked it. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, tears threatening to fall. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. A month later, I found a box outside my office door. No name, no note. I brought it inside and opened it carefully. Later, the security camera footage showed it was Grandpa's driver who had delivered it early that morning. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. Old family albums I hadn't seen since childhood. Pictures of Nathan and me at the park, me helping Mom in the kitchen, my small hand clutching Grandpa's when I was 5. At the bottom was a letter from Grandpa. "Olivia, these photos are yours. They tried to erase your place in this family, but I never forgot who you were. Keep them. Frame the ones you love. And always remember, no matter how they treated you, your roots run deeper than their lies." I cried then, not because of the past, but because someone had finally seen me. That same week, I was invited to speak at a local women's business conference. One of Grandpa's old friends had recommended me, and apparently my reputation for financial guidance was growing among his contacts, who had started referring clients to me. I stood on that stage in a navy blazer, hair neatly styled, facing over 200 women from all walks of life. And I told my story, not a sanitized version, but the truth. I wasn't born poor, I told them. I was made poor by a family that decided I wasn't worth investing in. And when I begged for help, they told me I was dramatic, lazy, useless, all while collecting checks with my name on them. The applause when I finished shook the room. Later, as I gathered my things backstage, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "My daughter went through the same thing," she said. "You have no idea what your story just did for me." I smiled and took her hands gently. "Then tell your daughter this. She's not broken. They are." That night, as I walked back to my apartment, I passed the restaurant where Nathan and Catherine had hosted their anniversary dinner the previous year. Their faces had once been displayed prominently in a framed photo in the window. I remembered walking past it countless times, another reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. Now that frame was gone, replaced with a "for lease" sign. I learned from Grandpa the next day that the restaurant had been part of Nathan's business investments, and it had failed when the investors pulled out. My phone buzzed with a message from Grandpa. "They finally realize who the real legacy is, kid. Proud of you." I stared at the screen for a long time. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was becoming myself. 3 months later, I stood outside the house I grew up in, not to visit, not to beg, but to buy it. After Grandpa cut them off, my parents had tried everything, remortgaging, selling furniture, and finally quietly putting the house on the market without letting the rest of the family know. But the listing had found its way to Grandpa through his real estate agent, who recognized the address, and then to me. "I don't want to live there," I told him over lunch at his favorite steakhouse. He nodded. Then don't. Own it anyway. And so I did. I signed the paperwork with steady hands. Full cash offer, no negotiation. The realtor, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses, smiled awkwardly when she realized who I was. You know your parents will have to be out by next Friday. That's fine, I said. I'll give them until Monday. After the closing, I learned they moved into a small rental apartment across town. Dad took a job at a local bank, a significant step down from his executive position that he'd lost. Mom started working part-time at a boutique. It wasn't poverty, but it was a humbling change from their previous lifestyle. I never went inside the house. Didn't need to. The walls of that house had seen enough of my tears. They didn't need my footsteps anymore. Instead, I sold it 2 months later to a young family at a fair price that gave me neither profit nor loss. Instead, I focused on the life I'd built. The office expanded. I hired 2 staff members, both women who had faced their own family betrayals and needed a second chance. We weren't just a business. We were a rebuild. On a rainy Friday morning, I received another letter, handwritten this time, from my mother. Olivia, I know you have every reason to hate me. I failed you. We failed you. I let pride get in the way of being your mother. I convinced myself that helping Nathan would help us all. But the truth is, I wanted to believe you didn't need anything so I could sleep at night. I see now that I was blind and cruel. You didn't deserve any of what we did. I won't ask for your forgiveness, but I hope someday you find peace. Mom. I sat still for a while, rereading those words. There was no excuse in the letter, no manipulation, just regret. And oddly, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. I didn't call her. I didn't tear up the letter either. I simply folded it, placed it in the drawer with Grandpa's letter and the photos, and closed it, because that's where it belonged, in the past. Our relationship remained distant but civil. Occasional texts on birthdays and holidays, nothing more. We never fully reconciled, but the raw anger had been replaced with a quiet understanding. The next week, Grandpa hosted a small gathering at his home. Not a grand event, just a quiet evening with a few old friends, soft jazz music, and fresh lemonade. He pulled me aside near the fireplace. You know, he said, when I found out they stole from you, I blame myself the most. I looked at him. Why? Because I gave them the rope to hang you with. I took a deep breath. You also gave me the tools to cut it. He chuckled, then handed me a worn leather book. What's this? I asked, running my fingers over the cracked cover. My original ledger from the first business I ever ran. I want you to have it. I flipped through the yellowed pages, faded ink, scribbled notes, careful calculations. You built everything from this. I did, he said, and now you'll build even more. I hugged him then. For the first time in years, I felt what a real embrace from family was supposed to feel like. Safe, steady, true. A year after that fateful dinner, I stood backstage at a national conference for women in finance. Over 2,000 attendees, cameras, reporters, spotlight. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage in front of a crowd that once would have terrified me. I wasn't just someone who'd gotten a second chance. I was someone who had created one, for others and for myself. As I took my place at the podium, I looked into the front row and saw Grandpa. He gave me the smallest nod, and that's when I knew. The dinner that was meant to humiliate me had actually fed the beginning of my rise. By then, Nathan and Catherine had finalized their divorce. Their marriage hadn't survived the financial downturn and public humiliation. Nathan had relocated to another state to start over, occasionally reaching out with brief, awkward text messages that I rarely answered. My father had never contacted me again after that final voicemail. We remained permanently estranged, his pride preventing any acknowledgement of his wrongdoing. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.